You already know that music sounds different in different places. A concert hall sounds different from a stadium. A living room sounds different from a basement. And if you've ever been in one, you know that a professional recording studio is one of the best sounding spaces for music. This is because professional recording studios have to have rooms that sound good for a specific purpose. The engineer there needs to know exactly what they're hearing at all times. The rooms have to be well planned acoustically so that there are no conditions that have an unwanted effect on the sound. That could give them a false impression and make the music sound very different when it's played back in other environments. In this video, we're going to talk about the common problems that have to be addressed when you're making a room work as a recording studio control room. When you're recording or producing music, there's two main environments that you have to concern yourself with. The control room, which is the listening environment for the producer and the engineer, and the live room, which is the environment where the artist is creating sound, playing an instrument or singing. The main thing in the control room is that you want to be able to hear the music accurately. You don't want the room to be making sound. You only want the speakers to be making sound so that you know what you're hearing is what's going to go out into the world. So the main thing you want to do is take the room out of the sonic equation, and to do that, you have to make sure that there's no reflections or waves bouncing off one wall or another and coming back to hit you in the ear while you're trying to listen to the speakers. So there's a golden ratio between separation of the speakers and the listening position. This position is called the sweet spot. And these distances should be equal, an equilateral triangle. So as you can see, I've got a number of monitors here. I mainly rely on these bookshelf speakers, and my listening position is right here at an equal distance, equal to the distance between the speakers. The larger speakers are projecting farther back so that my clients, the producers and the artists themselves, hear the larger sound at a point that's further back from my sweet spot. So you'll notice that on all the walls there's various different panels and shapes and things, and the reason for this is because each surface in the studio should have a component of hardness or reflection and softness and absorption. So if you look at the floor, you see we have some wood and we have some carpet. So the wood is going to reflect some waves, and the carpet and the sofa is going to absorb some waves. And around the glass we have a piece of insulation behind some fabric. The glass is going to reflect waves, but the fabric is going to absorb waves. And what this does is it breaks up the waves so they don't come ricocheting right back to me. In the back of the room we have what's called a diffuser. This is just basic, simple lumberyard strips that break the waves up and send them ricocheting off at different angles so that they don't come back to me. They bounce around the room and eventually die out. So the room itself is not adding any characteristic to the sound. If you've ever been in a basement and clapped your hands, you know that that room sound comes back to your ears. Some people sing in the shower because the tile reflects their voice back to them and makes them sound reverberant. But when you're mixing music, you only want to hear the accurate music. You don't want to hear yourself singing in the shower, so you take the room completely out of the equation. Here are some of the common conditions in every interior space that have to be addressed to make the room a good listening environment for recording. I mentioned the word basement before. Everyone knows what this kind of space sounds like, especially if it has square walls and a cement floor. Just like any big space designed in this way, if you make a loud noise there, such as singing or hand claps, you'll hear lots of echoes depending on the size of the room. These are not the kind of echoes you might like to hear on a recorded track, although rooms like this can be useful for certain special effects. But if this room is going to be your main recording and listening room where you monitor the music you're making, then you need to have very tight control over these echoes or eliminate them entirely. In the audio world, these echoes are called reflections, and it's fairly easy to get rid of them. However, when you totally eliminate reflections, the result is usually a very dead-sounding room, which can also give a false impression of how the music will sound when it's played in other places. The best approach is to analyze the space thoroughly to figure out how to best control the reflections without making the room sound too dead. Before we talk about that, let's look at what reflections actually do and how they can be good as well as bad. Reflections are sound waves that hit your ear more than once. This is easy to understand if you imagine singing in the shower. The tile walls of the shower are very reflective, and when you sing, you first hear your voice as it emerges from your chest and mouth. As soon as the sound wave hits the tile wall in front of you, it bounces back and hits your eardrum again a few milliseconds after you first heard it. But the sound wave doesn't stop there. It also hits the wall behind you and comes back to your ear again before traveling onto the front wall and echoing again and again, and so on. If the shower is bigger, then it takes a little longer for all the sound waves to hit your ear, and those time delays result in a different kind of echo. If you sing the same way in a space the same size, but the space is covered with wood or wallboard, there'll be many fewer echoes. Obviously, the kinds of materials that make up your walls or cover your walls have a big effect on reflections. So how do you deal with these reflections in a standard room so that you know the sound coming from your monitors is not being colored in any way by the room? Here are the basic ways to handle room reflections. The primary way to deal with very apparent reflections is to put up material that absorbs sound. There are many ways to do this, including acoustical ceiling and wall tile, add-on absorption materials such as foam panels, and fiberglass insulation. The methods used can vary depending upon your budget, but these absorbers should be used intelligently so that you don't destroy any positive characteristics that the room might have for your sound. Perhaps the most effective and most widely used absorber is carpet. Thick plush rugs are very useful in the studio environment. They can provide a comfortable base for musicians, and they cut down on a big reflection problem that's common to standard interior rooms: parallel walls and parallel ceilings and floors. Professional recording studios avoid parallel walls for obvious reasons. If the reflections bounce in many different ways rather than back and forth along the same line, then they don't have a chance to build up and become an audible problem. When sound is redirected in this way, it's said to be diffused, and recording studios use different types of diffusers to redirect the reflections.